Hi, good morning, everyone. You see that I'm the only one using the handheld microphone instead of the earpiece, and that's because I'm wearing hearing aid. Yeah, I mean, we are in the medtech industry, right? So we have to embrace medical technology. Yeah, so a little bit about myself before I move on to the panelists. My name is Gabriel. I am from APACMed, which is short for Asia Pacific Medical Technology Association. So we are a not-for-profit medical technology association that represent companies operating in a region, medical device, diagnostics, and digital health companies operating in a region. Yeah, so today's topic is a really, really important topic because one of the mandate why this association was started 10 years ago was that, given that Asia Pacific is very fragmented, there are different requirements and regulations, the mandate for the association is really to drive the harmonization and the convergence of policies and regulations. So today's topic is really, really, important for our industry. So just to set the scene before I pass it on to the panelists is that, number one in Asia Pac, it is an important region for medtech innovation, undoubtedly. But of course, there are significant, challenges around regulatory fragmentations. Yeah, and this could pose, significant challenges to companies, whether they are startups or MNCs who are trying to scale and grow their presence across the region. Of course, there are ongoing efforts to, try to harmonize the regulations across the region, which is a good thing. But I guess the question is, is this enough? And where is this heading? So today I'm really, delighted to be part of this session. And I want to introduce my panelists here. First of all, on my left is Carlos. Carlos is the co-founder of Leap System, and Julia is the general manager for the Clinical Consultancy Research Center. Yeah, so maybe to my panelists, right, to kick us off, maybe if you can introduce yourself a little bit about your organization, and maybe also share with us from your perspective, what does regulatory fragmentation means to you in the Asia Pacific region?
Julia, ladies first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks for having me as a panelist here. So actually, I'm Julia Yuan from the CCRC and this company, and also from the IBDA. This is a company founded in Shanghai, China, and also as well as from Taiwan. And our company is helping the medical device company to plan their business strategy model and to get a salary of the regulatory pathway to shorten the timeline to get as many as country clearance from the regulatory body. And from the QMS, from the beginning, from the end-to-end service, our company can provide. Thanks. Nice meeting you.
Great. Nice meeting you. So my name is Carlos Granada. Yes, I'm the founder of Leap System, which is a software that we are developing to accelerate clinical trials timelines. Is a company part of the portfolio of Zelery-Med, which is the prime company. My own experience in the medtech is for the last 30 years. I've been co-founding companies. I've been in the clinical site level, CRO, regulatory and clinical strategy. And I'm thrilled to be here and sharing our own knowledge and lessons learned.
Yeah. So how does the what is your perspective of the regulatory, fragmentation in this part of the region in Asia Pac, based on the work that you are doing, with your clients in this region?
So from our side, from the regulatory approval part, I think from our side, that means we need more manpowers, and we need redo a lot of repeating works. So that's the challenging piece, and also the language in these Asian countries. There's so many different countries, so that means not like Singapore is official language is using the English. It's much easier to prepare the dossier for the regulatory bodies. But for considering if you enter into these Asian countries, we have to translate into the local language, and that means require more manpowers, local agencies to help us to do that part work. So that means more time consuming and then more costs.
Exactly. Yeah. I define it as when I go back to Europe and basically US in the past, today I see the inconsistent rules. What that means is, delays, rework, manpower, and basically that really shift into extended timelines. And that's a challenge for startups, but also for strategics, to say, what is going to be my strategy? How I'm going to do it? Is Japan first? Is China second? How am I going to do it? So that's how we see the fragmentation.
Yep, right. Okay, do you have examples on, in the process of supporting your clients, right? Examples of clients, two countries having different regulations, how do you typically go about supporting your clients who is trying to maybe get into a certain markets, but the regulations in two countries are different?
Yeah. So maybe one example that I give in our own case, Australia for us is being the number one because we see a faster path. International regulations or approvals, Europe is really straightforward. But also we understand is, okay, what is going to be our strategic plan? Is a reimbursement strategy? Is milestones based into the for the next funding round? Because the Japanese market is really important, but it's a really time-consuming on documentation. China is the biggest market,
another war.
It's another war. We need a local partner to do it for us. So it's yes, but I have specific examples. In Australia, it took us less than 5 months to really get approval. In Japan, it was like 12 months to even just get the final negotiation with the PMDA.
Yeah.
So that's when you start balancing. Is okay, where should it start first? And startups, they don't have, and we don't have enough capital. We have limited resources, so we need to be smart as well how to do it and where to go.
Okay, Julia.
Yeah. So from my experience, actually, how designing, which country to go first. And then normally, especially in the past years, most of the companies probably have a business strategy model starting from the Western side. For example, US and European country. And then now the European is transitioning from the MDD to MDR, another delay. So now, so many company comes in mind and to find another way, another route, another pathway to accelerate their product launch in the other country. So, but for Asia itself, you probably understand in China, they launched the new policy since back to the 2013. So there's more restriction, more data requirements. But, the difference, the difference between those countries, but we still can find the ways. For example, you can confirm that your company strategy from the beginning of your product designing. So once you design the product and then you country in mind which target country you want to go, then you considering all the requirements from the regulatory body, from the perspective and from the designing standard perspective, and then you can come faster and then easily to get approval. Yeah. So that's the things you probably from the beginning. Now, for most of the time, the client comes to us is already in the late stage. They say, hey, I want to go this country and I want to get a register. But they didn't consider it back to the product design. And then they have to modify a lot of things. So, yeah, that's the things you always need to consider in mind. Yeah.
Thank you for setting the scene. Of course, I think the time, the cost, are critical factors, right? Yeah. So maybe let's focus on, diving deeper into the patchwork of the regulations right now, right? Yeah. So obviously we, based on what we just mentioned, right, there are obvious challenges of the of differing, differences, across countries. And what are some of the, maybe the less apparent but significant hurdles that, regulatory fragmentation creates? Top of mind, I'm thinking of like innovation, talent, but from your engagements with your clients, right, what are some of the other hurdles that, that regulatory fragmentation might cause for these startups?
For staff. So I think the fragmentation, the most hurdle has been caused is, they have a very lean and mean teams. They are not like MNC companies. They have so many affiliate or subsidiary in each countries. They have sufficient power, manpower to do the work. And for the fragmentation, especially different country, for the you want to launch your product, commercialization your product. For example, you need local sponsors. So for those really startup company, they have a very lean team, probably only the team in particular countries, and then they don't have the manpower in the target country want to go.
So
Yeah.
and I can complement that, which is really a struggle in the companies is limited resources.
Yeah.
That's really a pain point, because when a startup really they need, and there's a really famous phrase, time is money. And if you don't move faster, others gonna do it, right? So really is to complement Julia's point is, what is the strategy? Am I just collect data just to go to the next milestones, or I'm gonna include my reimbursement strategy to validate the future plan to enter in a larger market like China, US? I think every strategy is different, but limited resources is one major pain point, because when you start saying, okay, send me the investigator brochure, let's review that, and then translations and all that, so these start getting timelines. But one major issue that I have found in all these years is quality management systems. I believe, as a entrepreneur, you need to think always is, what is my design history? How I need to document this? How I need to defend my position in terms of regulatory bodies or the agencies, because that's a major request in terms of documentation. So if you don't start in the beginning with that documentation, when you are ready, basically you are not ready. And we have seen that a lot, doing gap analysis, doing reviews, and every country is going to request you different information.
Okay. Yeah. So good that you mentioned QMS. I mean, I think QMS doesn't come readily to the startups. It's not top of mind for them. Yeah. So based on your experience working with some of the smaller companies, right? Do you see them adopting QMS, at the very early stage, or is it really an afterthought?
I think it's after. I
think they need an education.
You need a lot of education.
And yeah, definitely.
It's like, I believe the concept is there.
Yeah.
But the time is not there.
Right.
Maybe the expertise is not there. So I believe I have seen companies that when they said, okay, my design is frozen, I'm going to do it. You said, okay, how you documented the past, how you documented the version controls, how you did it.
Right.
They
yes.
have any document.
So that's, I think, a main challenge. And I suggest, my recommendation is always start documenting. Start documenting, even in a framework that you follow. But you don't need to have certification 13485. No, but at least you follow the structure, you follow what you needed, and then have experts to help.
Yeah, Carlos, I just was just wondering whether you can talk a little bit more about the platform that you have, that LearUp system has. I guess my question is around, cybersecurity, privacy, health data, and, how do you typically deal with sensitive, health data, as part of your work?
No, look, we found this need based on what we discuss is there's a lot of fragmentation as well in technologies. There's a QMS from one side, TMFs, clinical trial management system, EDCs, but they are not interconnected. And when we found it, said, let's make it simple for companies. They had one system that integrates all these components in one username, one password, and that's it. And to your point is, let's validate this global, but we know we need to adapt it per country. So that's what we did. So basically, we said, okay, mainly the US is the main target companies to enter, but also we need to adapt GDPR, we need to adapt to TGA, we need to adapt it, Singapore, because every single country has their own adaptation and health rules. US is really, really strong. So we have to do a lot on cybersecurity testing, and, HIPAA, which is PHI management is top. You need to follow a lot of that. especially because when you are dealing with a institution in your contracts, basically that's a big language. And if you don't comply with that, you're going to be in trouble. So that's something that is going to be more required for devices because more and more are connected, to different wearable devices, sources. And that's going to be a big challenge if you don't prepare that in advance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and especially country by country, the requirements are different, especially for QMS and for the data protection.
Yeah.
I can talk more about China. See, China is the other one, the data protection. It wouldn't allow, if you are the AI-based or software as a medical device, they wouldn't allow the data to be transferred out. And then same as a European, you have, the data protection law as well. So right now, how to protect to prepare ahead. For example, you want to collecting the data on the cloud base. Probably you have to have when you're designing the product and building the products, if your target country is China, and then you probably think of to having the separate server in China.
Yeah.
So that's sort of things you have to plan ahead.
Yeah. And that's true because for Australia is the same. US, Europe, they have the data privacy framework. You need to self-certify. You need to maintain your SOP. So it is a global need, but you don't need to miss the local requirements. You can.
There's more restriction right now for the
Actually, this data localization, I think it's also an important factor as part of the region. Yeah, especially when it comes to harmonization. Do you have any thoughts around data localization, whether in the region or if you have examples outside APAC?
So look, for example, we have been involved in projects that is US-Japan by the Harmonization by Doing program. That helps, but still you need to be local based. So still is a global program. It still helps on timelines, but the process to plan that takes time.
Yeah,
negotiating with not only FDA and PMDA, but also the investigators takes time. For example, if you are going to access in the US with a device that has, over the wire, but in Japan now, so how we're going to manage the process, how we're going to enroll the patient, how we are not going to deviate in the US, but yes, it's accepted in Japan. So all those situations are the challenges. And then, at the end is how we manage the data, because in these cases, let's assume you have an adverse event and the committee of events, to manage those adjudications is in the US. You need to transfer the data. You need to do that. There's no another. So basically you need to put in place local servers, put the framework to accept the data to be transferred. And that's going to be a challenge, and especially in contract management. So there's issues, but it still is possible.
Yeah, the data sharing among the countries, I think, is big issues. It's not quite open yet, country by country.
Okay. Yeah, still on the patchwork of regulations, right? Maybe Julia, how do you manage the trade-off, right, between speed to market while ensuring full localized, compliance? For your clients.
Okay, I think there's a good initiative has been going on. For example, the ACM has been introduced the common submission dossier template, and also there is also in Australia there is a mutual recognition agreement, and there is a COR comparable overseas regulators, this program and an initiative going on. So I think we can maximize in using these good policies. Initiative has been launched by the government, and to ensure the compliance, and also you can speed up and accelerate your timeline for timeline as well. So yes, that's something that we can recommend, and then to maximize in using the policies has been launched by the governments.
Yeah. So now we'll move to a little bit more to explore the pathway, right? We talk about localization right now. Are you seeing more localization or harmonization approaches in your practice? Yeah, and that's one question. And the other question is, right, what's your strategy for your respective organization to navigate this fragmented landscape?
Look, in our case is either we have the knowledge, we know how to do it global, we need local expertise. It's impossible to navigate your strategy if you don't understand the regional, but also the local, but also the domestic pathway. Is difficult. And Julia just mentioned language barriers, cultural awareness. I mean, you cannot negotiate with a regulatory if you don't understand how they deal with that, how they communicate. So my plan is, okay, we have this strategy, we're going to be, but we cannot say this is the regional strategy for Asia. No, this is the plan, but then we need to go country by country. Let's select these 2 countries. Let's how the process was managed, and then we can escalate to the next level. That's how basically we think always.
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the company type. For example, the startup company, definitely you need to come up with different solutions comparing to the MNC companies. So for definitely just like, you say the manpower, the local know-how, expertise, I think you cannot get away with local know-how. For example, the language difference, Thailand, I can't understand any words. And then I cannot speak Thailandese. Yeah, so I think the manpower and the local know-how, expertise, and you're seeking for example, the startup company, normally you don't have pitting, and then the government require local sponsor to be the local representative to holding the license for the device, and that part you definitely need to find a partner. But versus the MNC, they don't need that such service. They have all their own team. They just only need you local knowledge, local expertise to do the work. Then their own company, they do have their own company to hold the license. So that I think the different company type of the company level of the stage of company has a different strategy to put it implement.
Okay, I think what we have these challenges, right? Regulatory, fragmentation. I think there are also efforts to try to harmonize these guidelines and regulations in the region. For example, the Asian Harmonization Working Party, and I'm sure there are other initiatives that are looking at harmonizing the regulations across the region. So, what is your take on some of this initiative? Are they, effective? What is the status? And what can we expect from this, harmonization initiative coming up from the various bodies and agencies?
Yeah, I think the best the group has been found is the initiation, the harmonization, I think is MEDIF, International Medical Device Regulatory Forum. I think they found a lot of workshop and together all different Western country agencies, for example, Europe and European, and also Australia is also in the member, and also Japan, China, and Singapore is also in. And they put a lot of the initiative to harmonize the requirements. For example, they come up with so many guidance, and then most of the country, the agency, the reviewers is reference to that guidance to become the customized local needs, require expectations. So that's the initiative has been put on and going on, and then there's so many focus. For example, there is a single medical audit program has been put down. So that part has also increased a lot of efficiency. Once you do the audit has been performed by one of the member countries, so you don't need to redo the audit again. For example, you do in US already. Australia doesn't well recognize that audit result rather than redo another audit, on-site audit in Australia. So I think that's a lot of the initiation. And then, but the challenging piece is how to balance the country expectation, country local requirements, and just once again, the data sharing is not quite open, transparency yet. So that's also come out, but that's quite effectiveness, and I think it's been quite well recognized most of the countries on the world.
No, and I can complement that is about countries are aware about international lessons learned. The European case, the ISO standards. For me, I see it is what is the priority of each country. Are they going to really put the efforts to do this harmonization, or they said I need to really be careful about AI. I need to be careful about data sharing. I'm not going to harmonize that. Those are basically how the country is going to behave. It's going to accept those. So that's one case. In the other hand, I see maybe more collaborative work on the clinical trial side. When you see the regulation about submissions, for example, I mean, there's a document called the investigator brochure. I see there's minor differences, right? But also is the testing is, do you need GLP data or you don't need GLP data? Those type of situation. But biocompatibility you need, it country. But at the end, it's a 13485 template, right? That's a type of harmonization. So I think, it's more about the country priorities and if they are willing to do it and if they're open to do it. But still, I see a lot of challenges, especially with the AI coming more in that sense.
Yeah. So I understand that there are some, regulatory reliance, between, say, Singapore and Singapore HSA and Thai FDA. Can you let us in on maybe some of the other, regulatory reliance initiatives that are coming out from the region? Beside maybe the Singapore HSA and the Thai FDA, Thai FDA using Singapore HSA as a reference site.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of countries doing this practice right now.
Yeah.
For example, Australia has, just like I mentioned, there's a mutual recognition agreement. There is a COR going on. They can recognize, for example, Singapore HSA approval, and then to shorten, got a fast track, and then certain of the conformity assessment will be, depends on the Singaporean approval rather than to reassess by the Australian, the other TGA. So there is Australia, they are doing this, and also, for example, Taiwan is recognized, the FDA clearance and CE marking, the European clearance. So you can get expedite approval timeline rather than go traditional approval timeline. And also, in China right now, they try to introduce the overseas clinical trial data as well. So they maximizing to accepting to avoid the manufacturer to redo the clinical trials. But the prioritization is the requirements you have to meet the expectation on the protocol design. So from designing the stage, you probably need to consider the different authority bodies, the agency bodies requirements. So there's a lot of initiative, and also the Japan, there is a harmonized by doing Japan versus including into the US trials, and then you can accelerate your approval timeline as well. So there is quite a lot of initiative and establishing going on in the Asian PAC.
Yeah. So when you mention fast track, I just want to get a sense of how fast is fast.
Probably save 1/3 of time. One third.
Okay.
So there's a lot of those here, for example, conformity, the CA conformity assessment, a lot of the for example, you already done the QMS audit by the single audit program country members, and then those things you don't have to redo, and then they just simply accept the result outcomes.
Right.
So that's saving a lot of time. Yes.
Yeah. Something that I will complement, initiatives that I start seeing. For example, in Australia, about the tax incentives on R&D, that's something really helpful. And I see it is because aligned with the FDA strategy, FDA, I wouldn't say FDA itself, the US, they see is we're losing innovation. Companies are going outside the US to do the first in humans, to get approvals, and they shift. And they open the door saying, we're going to have an early feasibility program. And we're going to have a modular PMA program. So basically, they're saying companies come and we help you to navigate these approaches. So I see Australia is doing that a lot with companies, investing first on the development, first in human. And it's a tier 1 country. These companies are looking as well to go to the US. But also Singapore, I see some examples. I mean, China is really strong in that sense, but also is data privacy. Is how is my data is going to be transferred? Or is going to be managed? I see a big challenge there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll talk about Patchwork and the pathway. So maybe let's look into the future. So do you foresee a future, right, where APAC move towards a harmonized regulatory framework, or do you think it will still remain, status quo for now? Still very much, patchwork in a sense, at least in the near term?
I think different things. For example, the standard-wise will be harmonized, I think, eventually. And then clinical trial data will maximize it to harmonize and then to having the global Asia APAC clinical trial rather than individual standalone country trials. But for the data-wise, for the AI-powered medical device, or there's involving the data collection, involving the AI-powered device, I think that will be localized.
Oh yeah.
I think that's something in the future. I don't think there is a trend to having the more transparency, data sharing among all over the world. I think that part is I think it's more localized rather than to open for the world. So that's really depends on different aspects.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, even in countries, specific countries, even in the US, California has their own act on.
Right. Yeah.
So I would, but I see, that's gonna be the plan. I mean, I see a really strong normalizations programs. Now, again, is the willingness of the countries to do it, and data privacy will be a big topic.
So, Carlos, I just want to pick up that bit that Julia mentioned about AI, right? Some of these emerging technologies like, AI and blockchain, how do you see this, maybe excavating or elevating regulatory fragmentation in the region?
Look, I see a lot of initiatives, and especially on, for example, translations review. I see a lot of examples on narratives, on safety reporting using AI. The big challenge always is how this data is going to be protected. And it's been local, but then again, you need to transfer this to overseas. How that's going to be managed. Blockchain, I have been part of a couple of examples, and in clinical trials, in pharmaceuticals is really, they're good examples. On MedTech, I see challenges, especially because clinical sites are not going to open their EMRs. And, to negotiate that is going to be a big liability for these sites, especially PHI management. At the end, we go until the same bucket, is how the data is going to be managed, how the privacy is going to be managed, who is going to be seen, who's going to be reviewing, who's going to be accepting. But we are going in that direction. I mean, I remember 20 years ago, people talking about capturing data electronically. No, paper. Paper was paper. And now look at this. So it's going to be the time. It's going to take time, but we're going to that direction.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe at this point, I just want to open, this session to the floor. If you have any questions, you may want to ask our panelists. I think this is a good opportunity to get the advice and guidance. Around, some of the things that around regulatory fragmentation and harmonization. Any questions from the floor?
So maybe a question I have for this: who is now thinking, to enter into one of the Asian markets in one of the countries? What you guys are seeing, conversations, what are the products, because maybe we can start the conversation like that. And is anyone thinking, to access one of these countries? And which product, I'm sorry? Your name?
It's an orthopedic device for infection, but our biggest question, balancing market size, geographic centralization, and complexity of first regulatory entry. It's a multidimensional.
It is.
Asian.
It is. It is. And always in that sense is, what is going to be the strategy? Is because you need the data just to go back to the US for a further reimbursement strategy, or you want to expand because you are established in the US? Always come to that. But I see your point. Is
start that language.
So exactly.
Many of local language rather than English.
But look, we saw that in Europe. It was the same challenge, and now look how Europe is managing these days. Of course, the MDR, shipped a little things and didn't help. but at the end.
That's why I'm looking at Asia.
Okay. Look at that.
They change the strategy.
Exactly, and now you change your strategy, which But now you said, okay, how am I going to manage it? Where is going to be my first country? How is going to be manage my talent? Yeah, I see that part.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, to mention Europe. There are a couple of countries like Switzerland and potentially UK.
Yeah.
Now recognizing that if you have FDA clearance or approval,
if you have already FDA clearance or approval, a couple of countries, starting with Switzerland, have announced that they would recognize that.
Exactly.
Instead of going through the full regulatory review process. Do you see that similar approach being taken by any of the Asian countries, or is that part of the discussion that is going on?
We have seen it, and Julia, I mean, I think you have.
Australia,
Australia is open to
for Singapore
as well.
So, and Japan.
Yeah, so
For Hong Kong.
yeah, I would. So at least my understanding, and we are an Australia and US based company. We have clearance and approvals in both markets. Our understanding is when you still go through the process, it still takes a substantial amount of time. Although the burden of review goes down, the process is still long. And I was just curious if, there are faster pathways that are in play.
I mean, the process is still going to be there. Still, you need to submit your dossier. Still, you need to support your clinical data, preclinical, biotesting, everything. But the path is going to be faster because you already presented to a regulatory authority like FDA or even the CE mark. Then for them, you said, okay, now the risk of review is going to be less, but still you need to follow the process and it's going to be faster approved for a device that doesn't have any other approval. But yes, it helps a lot.
But I think it's still a difference. If you don't have the approval from, for example, Australia, probably you spend more time on the review, on the process. So still saving some time, but like just I mentioned before, right now the Asian countries introduced the common submission dossier template. So if you prepare under those templates, I think that will save you dramatically the time as well. So that means they don't need to, you don't need to duplicate to prepare all individual dossiers.
Absolutely. And if I may ask a follow-up question, and if I missed that in the early part of your panel, I apologize. But what's your perspective on using something like MD South as a strategy to accelerate the approval process in Asian markets?
That's an interesting question. I will need to get back to you that because that's an interesting question is how you're going to manage. And again, which countries? If you're specific in one country or multi-countries, because again, it's going to be a local requirements. But that's a good point, to be honest. Good point. I'm just thinking now is about that is FDA recently opened a path that if you submit through the new portal, you get US, Canada in the same submission. So going to that point, that would be a huge benefit here to the Asian countries. And that's going to be countries, difference, but that's a good point.
Can you have a show of hand as to how many of us here in this room are product owners or running a company with a product? Yeah. Okay, so maybe one, final takeaway for some of our, audience here is that, if they are looking at entering multiple markets in the APAC region, what would be one advice that you would give them?
Julia, for example.
First, I think from the beginning of the designing the product stage, you need to come in mind with a target country and then to considering all the country's requirements while you're designing your products. So that will save a lot of time and then to avoid the hurdles and the challenges from the different agency. Since in China, there's so many agencies you have to deal. So I think, always, plan in advance rather than, to do the modification afterwards. Sometimes you will cost a lot of time for sure.
Yeah. So maybe I'm thinking here is, of course, if you identify the clinical unmet need, you have, okay, the design, product, and everything, but always is thinking about is what is that future that you see in terms of your inflection points? How you're going to start. Is Asia because you want to create a differentiation because the US is so fragmented as well and there's a lot of competition, or you want to validate to come back to the US? So that's maybe my recommendation. Just understand what is going to be that strategy and how your investors are thinking as well. And start documenting early stage all this in the development, because that's going to be a requirement when you start submissions.
Okay. Yep.
And your diligence, of course.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Any final questions for our panelists? No? Okay, with that, I just want to thank Carlos and Julia for joining us today. Yeah, and Carlos and Julia will be around. Feel free to reach out to them. Thank you.
Thank you.